Well, the police state isn't coming to the United States of America. The truth of the matter is, it is already here in full force. And now that Joe Biden has become the president of the United States of America, I see things not getting better as far as the police force is concerned, but getting worse. You see, over the past 5-6 years, I have been watching as conservatives, libertarians, Christians, gun owners, and Trump supporters have been labeled as Nazis. We've been labeled not only Nazis, but xenophobic, racist, and white supremacist, and basically the scum of society. I have watched as the Democratic left literally calls for not only putting us on lists to get us kicked out of our jobs, but also calling for straight up re-education of an entire mass of people. And I've also watched as the Democratic Party, in a nutshell, sat back, allowed it to happen, and even supported that particular viewpoint. We are no longer in a free country here in the United States of America, and so much is happening. And right now, Joe Biden wants to add a little icing on his cake, him and his new administration, with the pushing forward of House Resolution 350, which they're saying they drew up as a result of what happened at the Capitol. You know, because in this bill, it goes on to label more of domestic terrorism and basically creates offices within the multiple Department of Homeland Security, the DOJ and the FBI, basically creating a sub-departments that focus on domestic extremism. But hey, not domestic extremism on the left, only domestic extremism on one political side, you know, white supremacists and neo-Nazis, which, by the way, is exactly what they have labeled Trump supporters, which is why I am very, very, very skeptical of this. But don't worry, both the Republicans and the Democrats support this House resolution. You know, I think there is no more Republican Party. It's just one big fat Democrat Socialist Party. But before I get into it, I got to remind you guys, you got to start getting over to these alternative platforms. This is why I created Restricted Republic. It is open, uncensored content that I can really and truly share with you. And I'm not the only author on there. Justice Knight is on there as well. And this is where I'm going to share with you. And this is where I'm going to end up in light of everything that is going on. You got to start moving over. And right now, because of the censorship on conservatives, we're giving away our biggest special we've ever offered at $5 per month. Use the code TRUMP, and that $5 monthly fee will last for an entire year. But get on over to restrictedrepublic.com. All right, so let's dive into what the Democrats are doing and how they're really growing this system that labels their political opposition. Take a look at this article on themostimportantnews.com. John Brennan, the Biden administration will be going after an unholy alliance of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, and even he calls out libertarians. Now, let me show you the actual place he said that. And this is on news at yahoo.com on the National Review. John Brennan says Biden administration is moving forward in laser-like fashion against the pro-Trump insurgency. But here's where he actually said it, and I'm going to play the clip for you. So take a listen.
Supremacist groups. So I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Wow. So he knows that the Joe Biden administration is moving in laser-like fashion against religious extremists and libertarians. I mean, really? Wait, what? Bigots, racists, nativists, fascists, authoritarians. Look, the problem is, these are the exact same terms that they're labeling President Trump and his supporters, and they have been for quite some time. This is why I think this article was written by Michael Schneider on the End of the American Dream titles it this way: the police state is coming for religious extremists, evangelical Christians, pro-life activists, and even libertarians. And as John Brennan said, they're moving in laser-like fashion against you. Meanwhile, they turn a blind eye to all the burning of our businesses and our cities by BLM and Antifa. Not one word. No, they want to justify that. That's why I'm so livid, because it is such one-sided. It is so one-sided. It makes me sick. And what makes me sick is I'm against white supremacy as much as I'm against Antifa. They're all no good. But I have a problem when you're going to label someone who is a Trump supporter just for being a Trump supporter as a white supremacist. I mean, give me a break. That's what tyrants and dictators do, and that's how they silence their opposition. And the dumbed down masses are like, yeah, because they actually think that that's what these people are. Moving on to this next article here. So what does the Biden administration do? They announce plans to assess domestic violence extremism, but it's not the violence and extremism coming from Antifa and BLM. Nope. It's what they're calling white supremacists. Like, it's this massive issue in America. And I haven't seen what they're talking about. There's one event happened at the Capitol, okay? And then there's like 50, 60, 70, hundreds of things that have happened by the far left. So what do? They put up this bill. This is Congressman Freed Upton here, and he put out this press release. Upton helps introduce Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2021. This bipartisan bill will strengthen law enforcement efforts to prevent, report on, and respond to and investigate acts of domestic terrorism. Let me be very clear. There's already stuff in place against domestic terrorism in the U.S. It already exists. There's tons of laws, tons of rules. In fact, I've showed you the right-wing extremist document published by Janet Napolitano where she actually labels, if you're a pro-lifer, you could possibly be a domestic terrorist. They already exist. If you believe in end-time Bible prophecy, right-wing extremist has labeled you a terrorist possible. Or the New World Order. They're already out there. This is just more red tape and more laws on the masses. So much so that even Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, has come out against it. And look, I don't agree with everything she says, but I agree with quite a bit. She may be one that I would actually vote for in some cases, right? Here we have the National Review. Tulsi Gabbard is even warning against this domestic terrorist bill. And she says it is targeting almost half of the country. This is coming from a Democrat. And how is it that she's saying that? Well, I want to show you some of her quotes here because I think they're important. It is so dangerous. Speaking of this domestic terrorist bill, right? This bipartisan effort, this push of domestic extremism against one side, she says it's dangerous. As you guys have been talking about this is an issue that all Democrats, Republicans, independents, and libertarians should be extremely concerned about. Thank you. Especially because we don't have to guess where this goes or how it ends. Then she continued, when you have people like former CIA Director John Brennan openly talking about how he's spoken with or heard from appointees and nominees in the Biden administration, which is the clip I just played for you, who are already starting to look across the country for these types of movements similar to insurgencies that we've seen overseas, that in his words, he says make up an unholy alliance, which I just played for you, of religious extremists, racist, bigots. He lists a few others at the end and even lists libertarians. Then she goes on to say, right, she and her concern lies in how officials will define. That's my problem with it. The characteristics as they're searching for potential threats. And she goes on to ask, what characteristics are we looking for as we build this profile of potential extremists? What are we talking about? Are we talking about religious extremists? Are we talking about Christians, evangelical Christians? What is a religious extremist? Good question. Is it somebody who is pro-life? Where do you take this? She said. And she proposed the legislation could create a very dangerous undermining of our civil liberties, our freedom in the Constitution, and a targeting of almost half of the country. Then she continues, you start looking at obvious. You have to be a white person, obviously likely a male and a white person, obviously could be a libertarian, anybody who maybe loves freedom, who maybe loves liberty, or maybe has an American flag outside of their home, or those people you know who attended a Trump rally. The Domestic Terrorist Prevention Act of 2020 was introduced earlier this week in the aftermath of what happened at the Capitol, and this is what she is warning against. And may I say that I agree 100% with what Gabby said here? And that's why I have a problem with it. Now, here's the actual House resolution. And here's what it says. To authorize, right? This is the bill that authorizes the Domestic Terrorist Office within the Department of Homeland Security, within the DOJ, within the FBI, to analyze and monitor domestic terrorist activity and require the federal government to take steps to prevent it going forward. But like she said, how do you define religious extremists, right? This is a very thin line. But it goes on to say that the term domestic terrorism has been given a meaning, and here's the meaning it's being given: a foreign person or organization described as a foreign terrorist organization under such section, or an individual or organization deemed in an executive order as a terrorist. So if one day Joe Biden decides that conservatives are domestic terrorists, then therefore you are subject to being monitored, analyzed, and put on a list. That's as easy as it could be. But let's scroll down, because I thought this was also interesting. On page 4, it says here in section C that those who are involved will be required to undergo an annual anti-bias training. I'm quite curious what exactly they mean by that, right? But moving on a little bit, they'll also be required, this new division will be required to put out a biannual report. And here's how often they have to do that. You guys can pause that and read it on your own. But each report needs to include certain things. And here's what they've got to include: an assessment of domestic terrorism posed by white supremacists and neo-Nazis, including white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of the federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies and the uniformed services. And I'm flipping my page here. In the first report, an analysis of incidents or attempted incidents of domestic terrorists that occurred in the United States of America. And then it goes on for the next 5 pages, okay, 5-6 pages ish, right? To talk about white supremacy, neo-Nazi, what information they're going to collect and how often they're going to collect it. Now, I'm fully against white supremacy. I'm against it. You know, I think everybody was created equal. I think we all come from God. We're all equal in the eyes of God. It's sad that we even have to say this in today's day and age, but that's really where we're at. And here they are labeling it, but they've created this. Remember, they created this entire report as a result of what happened at the Capitol. I don't remember white supremacy being, well, what I remember is them saying Trump supporters did that and QAnon followers or whatever. But yet we have a document here going after white supremacy and neo-Nazi. The problem I have with it is the mainstream media and the Democratic Party have labeled Trump supporters, all of us, as white supremacist and neo-Nazi. Do you see? I think you see. I know that you see what I'm saying here. Page number 12. And this is why I say get on Restrictive Republic, folks. Really. There's so much more that I can dive in and open up on Restrictive Republic. And if you're already on the site, you know what I'm talking about. But here we are. They also plan on implementing training to combat domestic terrorists. So they're going to train an entire group of people, right? And here's what they're going to train them in: to ensure, all these different people up here, that programs include training and resources to assist the state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies in understanding, detecting, and deterring and investigating acts of domestic terrorists and white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of law enforcement and correction agencies, right? They're going to make sure they're not in agencies and the whole 9 yards. And then on page 14, they're also going to create a task force, and this task force is basically to make sure that white supremacists and neo-Nazis do not infiltrate federal law enforcement offices. So there you have that, right? An entire document with bipartisan support, because there's only one real party anymore. going after not Antifa, not BLM, nope. White supremacists and neo-Nazis with a very vague term. It doesn't define what that is. It doesn't define it. Just leaves it open to interpretation. But if you were to read the Daily Beast, right, then you could make the assumption off the Daily Beast that those are Trump supporters. Take a look at this article here. A former neo-Nazi's guide to deprogramming Trump cultists. And this is on the Daily Beast. Interesting. We live in one messed up world. And the America that I think you and I once knew went like 4 or 5 some odd years ago, and it's been slowly depleting. We got to start telling people the truth of what's really happening in our country. Anyhow, I love all of you. Please remember to sign up at restrictedrepublic.com. We've got that $5 monthly special going on right now. It's very limited, but it's $5 for an entire year. And this is where I share not only the content that we share on YouTube, I take off all the commercials, but I also share uncensored news and information, both Justice and myself. Anyhow, I love all of you. Please don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.